You're welcome back. We have now been joined by Clinical Director, AIK Nigeria, and he is Dr. Folajimi Adebowale, who is also the head Recon Health Media. Good morning, doctor, and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Okay, yesterday was World Diabetes Day, so we just felt it was good enough for us to talk about diabetes. Maybe we've not been talking as much about it as we should. So walk us through what diabetes really is and possibly what causes diabetes.
Thank you. So diabetes is called a situation where the body is not making adequate use of an hormone called insulin, which is produced by the pancreas. Sometimes it's believed that, yes, the insulin might be sufficient, but the body sort of is resisting it. So you have a situation where we have insulin deficiency, and you have a situation where we have insulin resistance. In both scenarios, the body is not making use of glucose adequately, and which leads up to a buildup of glucose in the bloodstream. And this can cause damage to several organs in the body. Sometimes diabetes is what we call starvation in the midst of plenty. And the problem is not just the elevated blood sugar, the problem is the complications with the elevated blood sugar, which sometimes can lead to medical emergencies like diabetic coma. Long term, it can damage the heart, damage the kidney, damage lower limbs, leading to amputation, and even the eye, leading to cataracts and issues with sight. There's also what we call diabetic retinopathy, where the retina is negatively affected because of the sustained, prolonged high blood sugar or poorly controlled blood sugar in the system. So and unfortunately, it's a disease that is getting more common as day goes by.
Okay, well, if it is getting more common, that means there are some things that are making it more common. What are some of these things that can make you have diabetes? Can you hear me, doctor?
The,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I thought you weren't hearing me. What are those things? What causes diabetes?
So let me paint the scenario like this. Sometimes our lifestyle, our diet, the Western diet that we have adopted along with civilization can be responsible for this. But apart from that, certain people are predisposed by genetic factors, by genetic hereditary reasons to be diabetic. This set of people have it like 50%. If they now go ahead to do much more of consuming Western diet, Western drinks, soft drinks, and they do it in a very, let me use the word, undisciplined fashion, it will lead to full-blown diabetes type 2. There's also what we call diabetes type 1, which is how some children were born, and it comes in right from birth. That is a different scenario entirely. Our focus much more as for the adults is actually diabetes type 2. And it's a combination of hereditary issues, then lifestyle is also part of it. In fact, one thing that's happened recently is that post-COVID, some people are now even people that have recovered from COVID are even more at risk of becoming diabetic as time goes by. But one big problem that we don't take care of is the fact that we do not have a preventive um, attitude towards our health. Now, there's diabetes and there's pre-diabetes. Pre-diabetes is when somebody is about to be diabetic, is no longer normal, is about to be diabetic, but is not yet fully diabetic. There's that window of opportunity that we see sometimes, but we don't always make the best use of it. People don't even identify that period because they don't get tested or they don't check their blood sugar from time to time. And that, before you know what, that will lead to full-blown diabetes. So in summary, the problem has to do with genetics, then our lifestyle also. Thank you.
Oh, this is the first time I've heard that. Well, it could be there, but the general belief is that when you talk about the kind of things that we consume, that the things that will likely give you diabetes are more in the African cuisine, the Nigerian cuisine, that we take more carbohydrates, which is not good, and all that and all that. You are the one that has said that Western food consumption could be responsible for exacerbating what we are experiencing now. What do you say about the kind of food that we eat as a culture? You know, we eat a lot of carbohydrates and all that. Some people have attributed that to the cause or as being the reason for the spike in diabetes cases.
So you see, our DNA, our genetics, we've had our traditional cuisines for hundreds of years, and that is not the reason for diabetes. Our traditional cuisine, our carbohydrate is not refined carbohydrate. It's the kind of carbohydrate that goes through a process of breakdown and that is gradual. Most of the Western diet that we've taken up are refined carbohydrates. They are like they've been broken to a certain extent. So when you consume them, they easily spike up your blood sugar. The other angle to the matter is that the volume or the quantity of what you eat is also a big problem. Sometimes there's been a lot of controversy around how do you control diabetes? Do you restrict the diet or do you restrict the volume or quantity of the food that they eat? One problem we've had in managing patients that are diabetic is that when someone is in his 50s and 60s and you restrict his meal excessively, they might become sort of depressed about it. And when they become depressed, they don't even care anymore. So they do not comply by any means. So we look forward to actually limit the quantity of what they eat, limit in such a way that it doesn't spike their blood sugar up. And most of our food is basically starch. Even beans is 60% starch. The problem is it refined starch or is it not refined? And the quantity that you consume, then also the proportion of how do you mix your meal. What's the portion of the vegetable? What's the portion of the swallow? What's the portion of the meat? These are the things that you need to put into consideration. Are you eating in moderation? Or are you just eating a huge, big meal at the same time? Those angles are going to determine your result when you check your blood sugar. So I am more in favor of our traditional meal. I am less in favor of Western meal that are refined. I am more in favor of staples that come from the West. I think we should stick more to our traditional meal and our traditional carbohydrate because they are not refined. They slowly get digested, and we need to watch the volume. And our traditional meals are also, they promote the us taking more of vegetable and more of grains actually.
So we should be eating our ban for full with full chest. But what you just
In
mentioned,
moderate,
yeah,
in moderation.
I heard that too. You just mentioned beans. Is that a myth? Because every time you're told about diabetes, some of these people are in favor of beans. That if you're diabetic, beans is good for you, wheat is good for you, and all that. Is that just a myth, or it is true? Because you just mentioned that beans also has carbohydrate.
Yes, beans has like 60%. I was just trying to let you know that the problem per se is not about carbohydrates. In fact, some people would tell you that it's actually the type of carbohydrate that you eat. And that's what I'm trying to point out that
Yeah.
you can't just, carbohydrate is our basic source of energy. You can't, unless you want to go on the other keto diet where they eliminate carbohydrate and all that. But being able to eat it in moderation is actually one big thing because traditionally, sometimes one problem we've had, and I can't call it traditionally, one problem we've had is actually the quantity of food people eat. And sometimes people eat things very, very late at night. So those are the things that we need to look into carefully and put right and use it and avoid soft drinks. It's also said that we should avoid white flour, white sugar also are things that we should avoid entirely. Rather than take those ones, let's go towards our traditional, unrefined sources of carbohydrates.
Okay, but that means there are a lot of myths around diabetes, what should be taken and what should not be taken. Can you help us find out some of these things that are really actually not true and some that are true when we are talking about diabetes?
So there's not just I won't call them myths. There's been some form of misinformation in that regard. And nutritionists sometime over the time begin to redefine the food. Some people are favored totally non-carbohydrate food because they feel that, oh, every form of carbohydrate will break down to glucose and that will spike. So they talk about, oh, do only a protein diet. But also we must realize that fat has a component to play when it comes to diabetes because insulin resistance has to do with obesity. You understand? And people with insulin resistance, when they lose weight, their use of insulin becomes better. So, like I said, the focus right now, considering the economy, considering people's age and all that, is that stick to two things: basic unrefined food should be what you should stick with. Avoid Western food, avoid wheat, avoid sugar, avoid things that have been processed meals. Avoid meals that come in a container or in a nylon in a package that's been through the factory. Avoid those ones. Stick to food that have not been through the factory. And also eat in moderation. These are very, very key things that we need to look at when we're talking about controlling diabetic diets.
Before we get some people who are concerned about their health going out with rulers to try to measure what they are going to take and all that, we need to know this. You know, sometimes in my experience, some of the people or cultures that really eat heavy are cultures that are agrarian, very hardworking people that have to go to the farm all the time, and they work very, very hard on the farm. They sweat a lot and so much more. So we found out that these people eat a lot. Does burning of calories have to do anything, have anything to do with preventing you from getting diabetes? Because you eat a lot, you work a lot, you spend so much energy and all that. Is there a relationship?
So thank you for that question. Now, you see, sometimes diabetes can be called a disease of affluence. That means that it's found among middle to upper class people. The issue is that it's found among people who actually live a sedentary lifestyle. They wake up in the morning, they go to the office, they sit down all day, and they still want to eat 3 square meals. They are in a calorie excess situation where they gain weight excessively, or to a good extent, and that falls for a lot of people in the city, in towns. You understand? The farmer will not fall in that category, and the farmer will be spared of having diabetes in such a case. But we're talking about people who are currently living the Western lifestyle. Okay, they are more predisposed to it than the farm person who wakes up in the morning and who lives his life, the way it was lived 400 years ago, 500 years ago. But we as Africans or Nigerians, we inherited genetics from people who were living that particular lifestyle for hundreds of thousands of years. But in the last 100, 200 years, we have now gone to school, we've been educated, we are sitting down in our offices, and we have much more food than was available to us 200 years ago. And that's leading to, an outbreak of obesity. Much more people are getting obese, even now from childhood. And it's also affecting our blood sugar and our blood pressure.
You said something about COVID and diabetes. I was trying to get the relationship between COVID and diabetes. You said something about whether the people who survived COVID were more prone to getting diabetes or something like that.
Studies have shown that there was a spike. I'm not sure of the figure. I'm not sure of the figure. I can't remember the exact figure, but it has shown that one of the problems COVID left behind is that people that recover from COVID have a higher chance of becoming diabetic months after they recover from COVID.
Why is that?
It has not yet been fully unraveled. It was just an observation that was done in a study. The mechanism behind it has not yet been clearly, identified. But it's one of the problems that COVID left us with.
Okay, let's talk more about this prevention of, okay, you've said a lot of things. Eat in moderation, avoid refined foods. These are like the basic things that you said that must be done for this to be achieved. Has there been any intervention regarding this diabetes, how to fight diabetes, maybe by government or non-governmental organizations, that people are not taking as much advantage of as they should?
Well, you see, you asked a very tricky question because your question moves around human behavior. Let's take, excuse me, and I'm trying to show the futility of government interventions in this regard. Let's take problems as smoking, for example. We know smoking is bad for you. We know it's written on the pack that smokers will die young. We know there are pictures of a sick, diseased lung, unhealthy lung on the back of the picture, but yet people will still smoke. So now let's talk about food for that matter. And in this era where people are claiming I'm a foodie, and people would want to tell you that this is food I'm trying to eat, and we have a proliferation of fast food around the country, and there's a proliferation of other food and buy food, and everybody wants to sweeten their palates and all that era. It's going to be a challenge changing that human behavior. It's going to be a challenge telling people who are adults to stop drinking soft drinks, unless they fall into, being conscious of their health, having medical challenges, and things in that regard. But, we've discouraged people from trying to smoke, which has not really panned out so successful. We've discouraged people from trying to stop drinking alcohol, which also has not panned out very successful. How much more do you think government will be successful when it comes to food? So I think in this situation, we should have an individual community-driven effort, understanding of the situation, and we should also be more, in terms of health, instead of thinking curative about our health, we should think preventive about our health. I believe when we change that mindset that, look, we can prevent diseases and we should be actively making effort to prevent diseases, that is when things like that or discussions like that can come up. But right now, we are still in the era where the average person who is hypertensive or who is diabetic, who doesn't have any symptom, finds it hard to believe that he is sick. The concept of sickness in the mind of people is when they are on the bed, they are having pains and they are having symptoms. They do not believe that sometimes diseases comes in a form that you don't feel anything 1 minute and in the next minute you are down. So I think we should have a sort of reorientation on the side of the people to understand preventive health and begin to realize that eating healthy is essential, for certain things. And another angle that you can look at the problem for is that there are some people who are actually mentally unstable, they are depressed, and they do comfort eating. They eat food, they eat a lot, they eat at wrong hours. So the food is not the problem, it's a symptom of a situation. They themselves need to be mentally balanced to stop eating wrong. So you have different scenarios, but overall, I think it's a people decision making here and not a government intervention. There's really
No, the intervention I'm concerned about, the intervention I'm concerned about is that a lot of people feel if you have diabetes, you are going to be impoverished because it's very costly taking care of yourself, the insulin shots that you'll be having and all that. So I'm concerned whether there is something that the government is doing or they are supposed to do and they are not doing, to help the people to, for instance, HIV. It comes free. The medication comes free. There are so many other things that their medication come free because they have been subsidized by the government or an organization or all that. Are these things available and then people are not taking advantage of them? That's my concern now. Because some people feel once I have diabetes, I'm gone because I cannot treat it because it's too costly, it's too expensive.
Okay, in that regard now, situations like malaria and HIV has gotten a lot of attention from the government and also from international donor organizations. But diabetes doesn't have that yet. Like I told you earlier, I said diabetes is seen like a disease of affluence. Okay, and it's not seen as a disease of poverty. Malaria is seen as a disease of poverty. Diabetes is seen as a disease of affluence. Medically, physiologically, the malaria is like starvation in the midst of plenty. So, and calorie restriction, diet restriction actually helps in controlling diabetes. So I don't know if there's going to be a change in that regard because it's a It's a disease where they don't feel it's among the vulnerable group, which is women and children. Okay. It occurs more in men and women, almost in equal amount in those in their middle ages and also in the working class. So I don't see if the economics will push people to say that, okay, we want to intervene. Yes, now there are people who are in the lower class, and yes, they are diabetic, but I hope that it can happen because I think we should work much more on enlightenment and changing people's behavior about how they eat and how they prevent this thing. Because like I mentioned earlier also, there's a window of opportunity of controlling diabetes called the pre-diabetic scenario. People are pre-diabetic. At that point in time, they are no longer normal blood sugar, but they are not yet diabetic. At that point in time, if detected, change in diet and some lifestyle modification can switch it back to normal. But more often than not, everybody's busy trying to make a dollar or a naira here and there, and they ignore their health in that regard.
Uh,
So I can't categorically say that you will expect a government intervention or it's going to happen. If they will, great. If they can't, I think individuals should begin to take their health in their hands and be much more proactive about how they handle it.
Well, sometimes you will just go for a test and you find the figures are not there yet. Maybe you're being tested and you find your figure is like 90 or 96 or 80 something. At what point should we get worried and try to start checking ourselves, even if we have not been able to check ourselves all this while? Because once you're tested, I'm sure there's a figure that you're given that is your level. Maybe from 80 to 120, I don't know, that is being healthy. But at what point can we start being worried that is either going too low or going too high?
Okay, so I try not to. I try to avoid mentioning numbers on in the public because there are slight variations to the numbers basically. But I'll paint the scenario. But for one to be pre-diabetic, you should have what they call glucose intolerance. And how you test for it is that you take a meal and 2 hours after you check your blood sugar. There's always a standard reference with the device you are using. And I will always refer people to take a look at the standard reference of value at that point in time. So thereby, because if you check your sugar on a good day, it could be normal if you are pre-diabetic. However, when you take a meal, it spikes up your blood sugar in a in a way that is not normal. So at that point in time, you know that yes, you are pre-diabetic. And also for certain people, you can check your blood sugar, and the best way to do is a fasting blood sugar. Although sometimes in very drastic situations, the random blood sugar can also be checked and it will really spike up way high. But the first group of people you should know this: if you have a family history of diabetes, you should check your blood sugar. If you've noticed that you urinate often at night or too much at night, you should also check your blood sugar. If you are having issues with your eye also, if suddenly you can't see clearly and you go to the ophthalmologist and they're trying to measure your blood pressure, they also check your blood sugar to know, because the blood sugar affects vision quite easily too. So with those guides and with those things as guides on parameters, you can know whether you are diabetic or not. You can just check for regular checkup, especially these days if you're above the age of 40. Sometimes we say above the age of 35 or above the age of 30. You can just walk into a lab, check if you have glucose intolerance, check if you are clearly diabetic at that point in time.
Okay, before we wrap up, just this last question. When you said when you urinate too much at night, how much is too much?
So you see, that's why I will not mention the number. You see, I try to avoid mentioning numbers online because reference values numbers changes. So you know on a good day that too much enough to disturb the quality of your sleep. Let me put it that way. And considering or excluding certain factors, when you know that suddenly the pattern of number of times you urinate at night has changed, I don't get up this often to urinate, but
Okay.
now I'm getting much more often to urinate. And especially when you know that your lifestyle has been a bit crazy, also sometimes that can also give you make you feel guilty to want to go and check. But like I said, it's a change in pattern. I try to avoid numbers in certain cases like this.
Okay.
But like I said, if it's enough, enough to disturb the quality of your sleep, you should get tested.
All right. Thank you so much,
Mm.
Dr. Folajimi Adebowale, for coming on the program this morning.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, we've been talking with Dr. Folajimi Adebowale, Head Recon Health Media, and also Clinical Director, AI Care Nigeria. And we were talking about diabetes. Get yourself checked from time to time and know whether to cut down on some things or not. But in the meantime, know that your lifestyle may contribute to your having diabetes. So be mindful of what you do, especially what you eat. And also the fact that you need to exercise all the time so that you don't become one of those that could be described as living a sedentary life, that you don't shake your body in any way. You get from your house to your office, you sit down, you go back to the bus and all that. Okay, we'll take a very, very short break, and after that we'll be joined by Nick Agule, and we'll be looking at the indictment, or so to speak, of the judiciary. Stay with us.